transition into security, because that is also another problem when the government has too much control over your data.
And so the first thing we're going to talk about is a certain place doing ads a certain way.
Well, I was just going to straight up say the first thing we're going to talk about is porn.
I was trying not to get you demonetized, but you're good. You already did it. Actually,
I don't
never
care
mind. We talked about politics,
getting
so
demonetized.
Get demonetized anyway.
Actually, yeah, that's a good point there. Hey, don't worry, some of the cutouts won't be demonetized.
No,
although
both of them definitely
both
will
of them are going to be demonetized. Hey, look. The point of the channel is to have accurate and interesting information. The demonetization is not a problem, especially for the podcast. I care a little bit more about the main videos.
And I mean, it's not like right now it's bringing in
those just take
large sums of money.
No, this is true. We're still a small channel, but even then, I mean, even if it was, the podcast is something I'd want to keep more open, right? And I'm saying this like to everybody. Like, I'm not going to edit this out. Just to be clear, like the regular videos may be a little bit more careful because there is generally more work that goes into those, and there needs to be a higher level of discoverability on those versus the podcast, which doesn't necessarily need to have the highest discoverability, because once you grab people, they tend to stay with the podcast they like. So I'm totally okay with talking about porn on this podcast.
We'll have to mention it also later.
We will, yes. So this one was interesting. So this is kind of jumping into the security section here. And this is kind of security related. It's so Pornhub, and the original source was reported by Bleeping Computer, but Pornhub figured out a way to have ads bypass ad blockers. Not in the way where like they say you have to turn off your ad blocker, they detect the ad blocker, say you have to turn it off or you can't access the site, but like literally displaying ads even with a good quality ad blocker in place. And there's a little bit more on that ad blocker specific portion in a bit, but the way it works is so there's WebSockets on web browsers, and it's basically, to put it really simply, it's a different way of data communication to happen on a web browser. And it's not presented to the web request API in Chrome. And as far as I understand, this is true for Firefox too, but I didn't test that. So basically what they're able to do is use WebSockets, which cannot be monitored the same way as other traffic because those are not presented to the web request API. The ad blockers, which use that web request API, can't see it, and so the ad can still be displayed. And so there was actually a screenshot, which I will put on screen, from Bleeping Computer, and don't worry, it's a censored screenshot, but it's a screenshot of Pornhub, and it shows, hey, you're using an ad blocker, buy premium if you want to avoid having ads, but then there's an ad next to it. And so it's kind of weird, and I just thought it was interesting, and the reason I put this in the security section was that it's interesting that they have this level of access, and there's so many different ways to bypass things. And I guess what I want to get at is just, I think some people don't realize how capable the web browser is of understanding what's going on your computer, and more on that in the next story. But it's people hear about these security problems all the time with web browsers, but maybe don't understand why the web browser is able to do this, right? It's just a website. Why is it able to do all these things? And obviously people also want websites to be able to do more, so that's why this direction has happened. But this is a good example of figuring out a way around something, which in this case was just a way around displaying ads. But what if it was a way around a security feature, right? When you have all these different aspects of a web browser, including things like WebSockets, it starts to become harder to secure because you have so many holes, basically. And I don't mean holes as in vulnerabilities, but points of entry. So anyway, kind of straight back to the WebSockets though, is it auto triggers the WebSocket versions of the ads if it detects that you have an ad blocker. But what was interesting to me here is it's still reaching out to a site. And in this case, as far as I understand, and I did not straight up test this, but as far as I understand, DNS ad blocking would still work. Despite this WebSocket thing being in place. So if you're using a network level ad blocker like a Pi-hole, then you're still not going to have the ads. And that was interesting to me. Time and time again, it's kind of been proven to me that DNS blocking with a local DNS server is the best way to get rid of ads. And I feel like kind of everybody should do it because you buy a Raspberry Pi and you run a couple of commands, and like literally with minor technological experience, after half an hour, you can have a DNS level ad blocker set up on your network. It's really not that hard to do. And it's going to do a better job and use less resources on your computer because it's done on a network level and cause less issues.
I wonder how long until we get with one of the more powerful like consumer routers, like some of the like gaming routers that have a little bit more headroom as far as power to process things. I wonder if we,
the ones that are
I wonder if
needlessly
we end
overkill.
up seeing like, because you know how like sometimes they make like open source like software for them. I wonder if somebody ends up integrating something like Pi-hole into like, just the open source software within like a consumer router, so that you could just like change it to that software and have it without needing to buy a Pi.
Well, yeah, I mean, Pi-hole's open source, so they could actually modify it so that the interface is part of your router setup, even on like a smartphone when you set up your router or whatever. Like, it wouldn't even have to be the full Pi-hole interface that you have to log into and like then have to change your router settings to point the DNS for every device on your network to the Pi-hole. It would just be like, okay, this runs on the router, and when you enable this feature, the router, which is generally used as the default DNS server, just goes through this Pi-hole filter instead. So you don't even have to make any changes. You just kind of flip it on, and then, oh, X website isn't working, so I'm going to go open up my smartphone and add that website to the OK list. You know, like, so there'd be a lot of interesting ways to do it. And just to jump in or not jump in here, but just to say, AdBlock Plus and uBlock Origin did figure out a workaround. It's kind of complex. I'm not going to go into great detail with it for lack of time, but they did figure out a way around it. So right now that is still blocked. That's not a way for other companies to push through this, but I still think it's just really clever how much work goes into making ads function, right? And so they're going to keep figuring out new ways to serve this information to you. And I guess over the time I've had a Pi-hole, time and time again I come across things that I'm like, oh, look at that, another workaround type thing for ad blocks, and I don't have to worry about it.
Since we're talking about Raspberry Pis, sort of, I'm just going to throw in something instead of having it as a separate topic, because it's really not topic worthy anyway. Raspberry Pi dropped for the Raspberry Pi 4. There is now an 8 GB of RAM model for $75. Yep.
For $75?
And
a Pi 4? Okay, that's pretty impressive. So probably like $100 bucks in a kit.
They're dropping 64-bit Raspbian. Yep.
Really? Okay, that's actually really, really cool too. Okay, I like to see that. That's awesome. Well, thank you for bringing that up. I need to buy more Raspberry Pis, more projects to do with them. So I have 2 Pi-holes, but that's all I'm using them for right now. So I should probably start to do more. They're very capable machines. So now I did say we were going to jump into data collection a little more. So this one was really interesting to me, and it may actually not be directly malicious, but I still don't like it. So eBay has been found port scanning people's computers. Now, the network people here are probably already like, oh, that's not good. But for those that don't understand, so all of your connections on the internet from your computer are communicated through a port. And there are certain ports that are dedicated to certain things. And so by port scanning a computer, you can potentially determine what's running on that computer. So some people here may be familiar with like setting up a Minecraft server, which runs on port 25565 by default. Okay, and there is 65,536 ports or something like that. I always get that number a little wrong. But anyway, so there's a lot of different ports that can be used, but there are some that are either commonly used for a specific service or dedicated to a specific service. And so 25565, for example, if you see that port has traffic traveling through it on a computer, you can assume that person is probably using Minecraft and they're connected to a Minecraft server. So that's the kind of information that can be pulled from port scanning. And there's a lot more that can be pulled from it, which I'll get to in just a second. And eBay was found doing this on Windows machines, which is also another interesting fact. They were not doing it on Linux machines, and I don't believe Mac either, but I haven't seen a ton of testing around that. But it's confirmed that they do not do this port scanning on Linux machines, which is totally possible to do so. Don't get me wrong. It's not like it's harder to do that on Linux. They're just doing it on Windows. So for some reason, eBay wants to track this on Windows. And they are specifically scanning for basically just remote access ports, remote control ports. So things like TeamViewer, which is a common like remote control software that people use for like remote support and stuff. And so there's a full list of ports here, which I'll put up on the screen. But it's so the ports here are all but one of them some form of remote control. And that right there is what leads us to think that it's maybe not completely malicious. It's like they're potentially looking for bots. They're potentially looking for people that are trying, and this has been a significant problem on eBay for a long time, people trying to raise the bidding by fake bidding. They have an eBay account attached to a bot, large number of eBay accounts that are artificially bidding something up with the hope that the real person or the few real people that are fighting this bid end up spending more money on the product, artificially inflating the price. And so eBay may be here trying to track the computers that potentially are under a remote control scenario that may be being used as a botnet to do eBay price changing there, price gouging.
One
I guess isn't really
interesting
the term,
thing.
but
So in the list that you have, you mentioned like the top one, the 63333. Not sure what that is for. I was just looking up something, and it looks like it's for trip-light UPSs.
Did you do 6333 or 63333? Okay, because I did a little search on it too, but didn't find a ton. So that's interesting. I don't know why they'd be doing that.
Unless they're trying to figure out like,
so just
because like yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Because like
farm?
most consumers don't have UPSs, and so like if
That's
you
true.
detect
Yeah. Well, and especially not
exactly,
networked
yeah.
ones,
And
they
so
do
if you
through
detect
USB.
network one, that tells you maybe you should monitor that more.
Yeah, okay, that, you know what, that actually is a good point. That may be the case. And so there's a lot here that actually seems like it may not be malicious. eBay may be really trying to do the right thing here. But it's still a couple things. First, it tells you how much information can be controlled by port scanning your computer. Now, these are the ports they're specifically looking for, so it doesn't at least appear that they're collecting data on other ports, which they can certainly see other ports running on your computer. They're just looking for and collecting the data in relation to this. And so it potentially is helping them prevent a real problem, because using botnets and stuff like that to increase eBay pricing has been an issue. But there's a couple things that confuse me there. So they're not testing on Linux, and I wonder why they're not testing on Linux, because at least my thought would be that most of the bots that are being used for this probably would be running on Linux, other than computers that have been pwned with the remote access software. But maybe they just have another way of tracking for Linux, and so they're not caring about doing the port scanning, because the port scanning is just to help them determine Windows PCs that have been compromised. And with Linux, they have other things put in place to try and detect that it's a bot. I'm not sure. But there's a little bit more to this that kind of starts to bug me and rub me the wrong way, and starts to kind of go maybe a little bit against them trying to prevent hacking, as people would call it, or really just scamming, artificially raising the price of something via bidding. So what's interesting is they are kind of fingerprinting your computer by doing this. So they are not just checking for ports. There's actually more going on here. And credit to Lawrence Systems, and I can't remember his name, but the guy that mentioned it on Lawrence Systems' little video that he made about this. I'll try and link that in the description for you guys. What they're doing is they're actually tracking more information about your computer. So they are also investigating things like your local storage, and potentially putting little bits of information on your local storage and pulling that back later. But they are also doing things like tracking the window size that you're using, which potentially, if it's a computer that's been owned, it might have 50 windows of this open, all in little windows, right? To try and do this. And so they're tracking that. They're also tracking information like fonts and stuff like that, which generally on a headless system, which is a computer without a monitor, it doesn't actually have to draw a screen, so it doesn't call those fonts. So if your computer's not calling fonts, then it's more likely that it's a bot. But then that starts to trigger me like, okay, maybe these are the things that they're hoping to detect Linux systems with. So I guess the port scanning is just for Windows, but they're not being selective about where they apply this other portion of what we would call fingerprinting, because once you have the data of like what fonts are loaded on your computer, a little bit of information about your local storage, what window sizes you use, and what ports have things running on it, all of a sudden you have a really good set of information of oh, okay, I see this computer, I know this is this person, or I know this is
Mm-hmm.
this computer that's visited us before. And it seems almost like to me, if it was just to prevent hacking or scamming, that they would do the port scanning on Windows, but these other aspects would be more common to do on Linux. And it just seems kind of weird because they're turning off the port scanning portion for Linux. But as far as I know, they're still doing this portion here. So it's a little weird, and I just generally don't like a
Yeah.
company having access to that kind of data. I don't want them to be recording it. And so that's what bugs me, is just they can figure out so much about your computer, and they can track you, and they're tracking you accurately, and this is without a cookie. You know, you can have cookies disabled. You don't need to have a cookie from eBay for them to know who you are and know that you've been to the site before. There's just so many data points, right? Because like this is just a small portion of the data points that they can get. They obviously can get information about what OS you're using, what web browser you're using, what IP address you have, all this other stuff. And so, you know, it starts to allow them to really build a picture of who's visited the site before and what they're shopping for. And maybe they can use the data to do marketing, you know, and maybe they can sell the data for ad agencies. But
make that money.
either way, I don't like that.
And this
Gotta
is
make
why
that
we
money.
need to
And
be
I mean,
able
I feel like
to own
eBay
our data and control when companies have access to it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I agree. I would rather have that data be property. You know, there's no reason that somebody should be able to, you know, come by my house and like, you know, come inside and take pictures of my house and you know, make copies of photographs I have in my house and walk away and be okay with that, right? But they can do
And
that on
it's
your
like,
computer just fine.
people make
That's
the argument
okay.
like, okay, well, a lot of products are free and you are the product, therefore, like you are essentially paying for it with that. But like, for one, in the cases of the services that are free, there's a reason that Facebook is making a fuckload of money, because they make a lot of money off of the ads. They are an ad company who uses social media to mine data
Yes,
to sell ads. Same thing with Google, where they make a lot of money. You know
exactly.
what social media services don't make a lot of money? Twitter, who can't really make as much money from ads. There's a reason for that.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the other thing is, you know, the argument of, oh, being able to own your data, you know,
mm,
like you said, like you are the product kind of thing, is just because you own your data doesn't mean you can't give other people permission. I can
yeah,
let anybody in my house, right? And so it's like you can own that data legally, but you can be like, okay, well, in order to use a Facebook account, we have to have access to your data and use this data. And you agree to, hey, yeah, you can use my data. It's my data, not your data, but you can use it. And if I don't want you to continue to use it, I have to cancel my account, but I get
yeah,
my
and
data
you
back. You
can't
don't get a
keep
copy
using
of
it
it.
to
And
target
so, like,
ads on other sites. If I show up on another site, you have to give me untargeted ads.
right, exactly. It's just that data is completely wiped. You don't have backup copies or anything of it. That is my data. I gave you access to it, and then I
Yes.
said, never mind, I don't want you to have access to it. I invited you into my house. I was okay with you being in my house, and then I kicked you out of my
Yeah.
house because you broke a rule, and you can't come back into my house until maybe I
Yeah.
forgive you later and I let you back in my house, right? And so it's like thinking about it like
Mm-hmm.
property, I think helps people understand why it's important and that you can still get these
Well,
free services
and then a
that are
service like
free because you're
eBay,
paying with
they're
your data.
making money off of transactions. So they're making money off of transactions
Mm-hmm.
while data harvesting you to target ads for the paid ads on their site, while also being able to target you, knowing what stuff you're more likely to buy, to trick you into buying things that you otherwise might not have if they didn't time showing you that listing at the right time. And so,
Right. And they can use this data to
yeah.
target you with
And so
Google ads
there's
and stuff too, of course.
and there's
So they can
these
target
all
you
these different
elsewhere.
ways that they can gain additional money off of you, despite the fact that their revenue is not ads, or their core revenue is not just ads, it's selling products. Like, that is what they are.
Yes, right, exactly. And so I guess this all kind of stands to just show just how much these companies are able to do. And again, maybe eBay really isn't using this particular port scanning and stuff maliciously. Maybe it is just to prevent scamming. That's possible. And you know, maybe they're going to release a privacy policy update or something, or it's already in there that talks about it. But the point is that there's, you know, you can not be signed into anything, not opt into anything, and watch a YouTube video on,
Mhm.
you know, cars, and you get advertisements for cars on newegg.com or not, or I don't know if Newegg has ads, but you get the point. And so like they're tracking you, without consent. They can figure out, okay, it's this person using this computer because we were able to fingerprint their computer. We know it's this computer, and the person that's used that computer before is interested in cars. And so it's like this lack of consent, right? That's what bothers me about it. And I don't like eBay doing it, and I shouldn't be, you can't punish me for wanting to use services like remote access services that are, normal. And I like, what is eBay going to do with this if they see, TeamViewer running on your computer, right? Like, okay, maybe TeamViewer's running on their computer and somebody's helping them, like walking them through how to purchase something on eBay. You don't know for sure that it means they're a bot. So I don't know. I don't know how useful it is, but oh well.
Yeah.